Hey guys, I've got a theory. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that World of Warcraft is not really a fantasy story. It is an alien invasion story. And no, I'm not talking about the Burning Legion. Well, yes, I'm talking about them too, but let's start much, much earlier. Because if you actually go through the races of Azeroth and ask one very simple question, are you originally from Azeroth? Things get weird. Really weird. Because it turns out that a shocking number of the races we think of as the people of Azeroth are actually immigrants. Some of them are immigrants from other planets, some are immigrants from other dimensions, and some were literally manufactured by space gods. And some are the results of magical science experiments that went horribly wrong. And then there are the ones who are actually from Azeroth. So today, I want to make the case that World of Warcraft is fundamentally a story about alien invasions. And by the end of the video, I'm going to try to convince you that the biggest plot twist in Warcraft isn't that there are demons, dragons, gods, and cosmic forces. It's that almost everybody is an alien. So, if we're going to call people aliens, we first need to figure out who actually belongs to on Azeroth. And this is where things get really interesting. Because Midnight has given us the Haranir. And the Haranir aren't just some random news race Blizzard invented because somebody in the art department really likes glowing mushrooms. They are ancient. Really ancient. They've existed on Azeroth since incredibly distant periods of its history, and their story has now revealed a connection between the Haranir, trolls, and elves. The basic idea is that an ancient population of Haranir existed in the forests of Azeroth. Some went deep underground and stayed like they were. Others remained on the surface, and over enormous stretches of time, these populations changed. Eventually, we got the ancestors of the trolls and the elves. And this is important because it means we have something approaching an actual native Azerothian evolutionary family tree, Haranir, than trolls and elves. Which means that when you're looking at the night elf, a blood elf, a troll, or a Zandalari troll, and all their various cousins, then there is now a very strong argument that you're looking at descendants of one of the Azeroth's generally ancient native lineages. And that's hilarious because the elves have spent thousands of years acting like they are the most sophisticated beings on the planet. Meanwhile, their family tree is basically ancient forest people. Ancient forest people? Ancient forest people. Actually became an elf. Oh, so congratulations, night elves. You are descended from extremely old forest people. You're still pretty, though. I'll give you that. And then we have the other native peoples. The trolls and elves aren't the only candidates for genuinely native Azerothian peoples. We've got the Pandaren, the Tuskar, and we've got various tauren peoples. And when I say tauren, I'm not just talking about the standard Mulgore variety. We're talking about the Yongol, the High Mountain tribes, and the Tonka of Northrend. These are all variations of the broader tauren family that developed on Azeroth. And then we got another really interesting group, the Vulpera. Their exact origins are mysterious, but unlike humans, dwarves, gnomes, orcs, and a whole bunch of other races that we're going to talk about, there isn't a giant cosmic laboratory somewhere with a sign saying, "Congratulations, we made a Vulpera." So they fit much more comfortably in the category of native Azerothian life. And then there are the Sethrak. Again, we're dealing with a native Azerothian species rather than a people who arrived from other planets. from another planet. So already we've got a pretty interesting divide. On one side, the natives, and on the other, everybody who apparently arrived here with a cosmic immigration visa. But then things get complicated, because one of the most interesting race on this list is the Dracthyr. And technically, they're not really a natural species at all. They were created by Neltharion. Yes, that Neltharion. Deathwing. The giant angry dragon who eventually decided that becoming the world's biggest environmental disaster was a reasonable career choice. The Dracthyr were created as elite soldiers by combining dragon essence with the adaptability of mortal races. Blizzard explicitly describes them as Neltharion's creation and as soldiers designed to serve him. So are they native? Well, sort of. They're from Azeroth, but they're also genetically engineered. They're basically the World Warcraft's equivalent of, hey, what if we took a dragon? Yes. And I mixed it with a mortal? Yes. And turned it into a super soldier? Yes. Are we sure this is a good idea? Absolutely not. And then Neltharion made them anyway. So I'll put the Dracthyr in the Azerothian artificial life category. They're not aliens. They're something arguably even more Warcraft than aliens. They're weapons. Now let's talk about humans, because this is where the theory starts getting stupid, and by stupid I mean wonderful. We generally think of humans as one of the most normal races in Warcraft. Humans, the basic fantasy race. Every fantasy game has humans. They're the default setting. We need a race that looks like the player race. Except humans aren't actually native to Azeroth. Not really. Because their ancestors were the Vrykul. And the Vrykul, well, they weren't originally flesh and blood Vrykul. They were Titan forged. The Titans created or ordered the creation of various Titan forged peoples as part of their work on Azeroth. And among these Titan forged were the ancestors of the Vrykul. So let's pause here. The Titans arrived on Azeroth. The Titans are cosmic beings. They created Titan forged beings. Those beings eventually include the Vrykul. The Vrykul are affected by the curse of flesh. They became flesh. And eventually some Vrykuls begin giving birth to smaller, weaker children. And those children became what we recognize as humans. So if we're following the logic all the way back, humanity is descended from creatures that were created by cosmic beings who themselves came from outside Azeroth. Which means humans are basically space god refugees. And every human in Stormwind is walking around thinking, yes, this is my homeland. Mate, your ancestors were manufactured by aliens. And humans aren't alone, because then we have the dwarves and the gnomes. And this is where the conspiracy board starts getting really crowded. Dwarves and gnomes are also descendants of Titan-forged beings. The dwarves came from the earthen. The gnomes come from the mechagnomes. And these beings were part of the Titans' Great Ordering project on Azeroth. So humans, dwarves and gnomes all have essentially the same problem. They're descended from Titan creations. And the Titans aren't exactly your friendly neighborhood fantasy gods. They're cosmic entities. They travel between worlds. They shape planets. They build civilizations. They create life. They show up on a planet and go, needs more order. And then they start installing machinery, so when a dwarf tells you, I'm from Azeroth, you can technically respond, your operating system says otherwise. And then we have the Worgen. Now, Worgen are easy because underneath all that fur, they're humans. The original Worgen curse transformed humans into Worgen. So if humans are alien descendants, then Worgen are basically aliens with a werewolf skin installed. Which means we can put an asterisk next to Worgen. They're not a separate alien species, they're alien derived. And honestly, that's the most Warcraft sentence I've ever said. Kul Tirans are even easier. They're humans. They're just larger humans. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. Well, I kind of do. But you know what I mean. They are humans. They're just a version of humanity that discovered seafood, sailing, and apparently carbohydrates. So yes, Kul Tirans, alien, technically. And then, now, this one gets interesting, because goblins aren't quite as straightforward as humans, dwarves, and gnomes. They originally are tied to kaja'mite and the trogs. Mimeron experimented with trogs, and exposure to kaja'mite played a major role in the development of goblin intelligence and civilizations. So are goblins aliens? Well, no, probably, maybe. This is where I have to put on the academic glasses, adjust imaginary glasses. The goblins aren't aliens in the same clean sense as the orcs are. They're much more like Azerothian life that got aggressively modified. Imagine if humanity discovered a magical mineral that turned a bunch of primitive creatures into extremely intelligent capitalists. They're basically goblins. That's basically goblins. And somehow they immediately invented corporations, pollution, explosives, debt, and health insurance. Okay, maybe they're not aliens. Maybe they're just the natural endpoint of Azerothian evolution. We finally get to the actual aliens. The ones who don't need an asterisk. The ones who don't need a footnote. The ones who don't need a giant lore video explaining why technically they're from Azeroth. I'm talking about the orcs. There's no debate here. The orcs are from Draenor, not Azeroth. Draenor. A completely different world. And they didn't arrive on Azeroth because they were looking for a nice place to settle down and raise some children. They arrived through a portal. And then they invaded. They came through the Dark Portal and attacked Azeroth. That is an alien invasion. That's literally the plot of an alien invasion movie. Imagine the opening scene. A mysterious portal appears, strange creatures emerge. They have unfamiliar technology. They don't come from this planet, and then they started killing people. Hollywood would make 8 movies about that. Warcraft just calls it the First War. Because the orcs aren't even the worst aliens involved in their story. Because who was manipulating them? Who helped push them toward this invasion? Who turned their conflict into something much larger? The Burning Legion. And the Burning Legion? Oh boy, those guys are aliens. Demons from the twisting nether, cosmic beings, interdimensional invaders. They don't belong to Azeroth, they don't belong to Draenor. They basically belong to the category of what if hell had a space program? And their entire purpose is basically to invade worlds. So the orcs arrived on Azeroth, because they're being manipulated by an even bigger alien invasion force. Which means the First War was basically aliens invade Earth because other aliens told them to. And then the Draenei arrive. This is where the theory becomes absolutely beautiful, because the Draenei are also aliens, but they're double aliens. Let me explain. The Draenei were originally from the Eredar. No, not the Eredar. Yes, the Eredar. They came from the world called Argus. Then Sargeras and the Burning Legion came along. The Eredar civilization was corrupted. Valen and his followers escaped, and eventually they settled on Draenor. So when the orcs met the Draenei on Draenor, the Draenei weren't actually native to Draenor either. They were aliens living on an alien planet. And then the orcs invaded them. So we've got Azeroth, alien orcs arrive. The orcs have been manipulated by alien demons. Then they're invading another group of aliens who are living on a planet that isn't theirs, their original planet. So this is not fantasy. This is Star Trek with swords. Think about that for a second. The orcs are aliens, the Draenei are aliens, the Burning Legion are aliens, the humans are descended from Titan-created beings, the dwarves are descended from Titan-created beings, the gnomes are descended from Titan-created beings, the Worgen are transformed humans, the Kul Tirans are humans, the Goblins are the result of magical evolutionary experiments, the Dracthyr are genetically engineered dragon soldiers. And the elves and trolls? They're apparently descended from one of the oldest native peoples of Azeroth, the Haranir. So suddenly, the entire history of Warcraft starts becoming less like fantasy races fighting each other and more like the indigenous population of a planet trying to survive thousands of years of cosmic interference. We haven't talked about the old gods because, the old gods, these things aren't exactly native Azeroth life either. They're cosmic parasites. They came to Azeroth from beyond the planet and embedded themselves into the world. They weren't born here, they crashed here. And then they started corrupting the planet, which means Azeroth's history is basically, hello, we're the Titans, get off my planet. Okay. Hey, hello, we're the old gods, get off my planet. Okay. Hello, we're the Burning Legion, get off my planet. Okay. Hello, we're the orcs, get off my planet. But we're not actually here voluntarily. That doesn't make it better. And somewhere in the background, the Haranir are just sitting there like, we told you all to leave. And that changes how we look at Azeroth. Because Azeroth isn't just a fantasy world. It's a contested world. Everybody wants it. The Titans want to order it. The Old Gods want to corrupt it. The Burning Legion wants to destroy it. The Void wants to consume it. The Dragons want to protect it. The Orcs want to conquer it. The humans want to build kingdoms on it. The Elves want to protect their forests. The Trolls want their ancient empires back. And the Haranir are basically sitting under the roots going, can everybody please stop touching things? When you play World of Warcraft, you usually think of Azeroth as the home of your character. You log in, you're a human, you're in Stormwind, you think, welcome home. But is it actually your home? If you're a human, your ancestors ultimately trace back to Titan-forged beings. If you're a dwarf, same problem. Gnome? Same problem. If you're an orc, you're literally from another planet. If you're Draenei, you're from another planet that you were already visiting after leaving another planet. If you're Worgen, you're human who got bit by a Warcraft equivalent of a magical werewolf virus. If you're a goblin, your ancestors got blasted with magic minerals until they became accountants. And if you're a Dracthyr, you were literally manufactured in a dragon military laboratorium. And then you have the native species, the trolls, the elves, the tauren, the Pandaren, the Vulpera, Sethrak, Haranir. These are the people who actually feel like they belong to the planet. They aren't necessarily untouched by outside forces, far from it, but their roots are Azerothian. And that's what makes the Haranir revelation so fascinating. Because they potentially give us something we've never really had before. A clear window into what Azerothian life looked like before everyone else's cosmic bullshit arrived. And I love that. Because for decades, Warcraft lore has basically been here's another ancient race. And then you ask, where did they come from? And the answer is the Titans, or the Void, or another planet, or a dragon made them, or they were cursed, or don't worry about it. And now we have the Haranir essentially standing there and saying, no, we were here. So I think we've been looking at it from the wrong perspective. We've been calling it a fantasy story, but maybe it's something else. Maybe World of Warcraft is fundamentally a story about invasion, an alien invasion story, again and again and again. The Titans arrive, the old gods arrive, the Eredar become involved with the Burning Legion, the orcs came through the Dark Portal, the Draenei flee across the cosmos. The Burning Legion invades Azeroth, the Scourge spreads, the Void reaches into the world, and every single time Azeroth gets caught in the middle. Think about it. You're Azeroth. You're just sitting there. You're a planet. You got oceans, you got forests, you got mountains, you've got some dinosaurs. Everything is going pretty well. And then suddenly, boom, old gods. Hello, we're going to corrupt you. Then, boom, Titans. Hello, we're going to reorganize your planet. And a little later, boom, orcs. Hi, we're going to conquer your planet. Boom, Burning Legion. Hello, we're going to destroy your planet. And then, boom, the Void. Hi, we're going to consume your planet. At some point, Azeroth has to be thinking, can I please have one weekend without an invasion? World of Warcraft is an alien invasion story. Not because every single race is technically an extraterrestrial. That's not the argument. The argument is that the central history of Warcraft is built around outside forces repeatedly entering Azeroth and transforming it. Some came from other planets, some came from other dimensions, some are cosmic beings, some are creations of cosmic beings, some are generally engineered or genetically engineered. Some are the descendants of creatures engineered by cosmic beings, and only a relatively small portion of the world's peoples can point to Azeroth and generally say, yeah, we've been here from the beginning. And that's what makes the whole thing so fascinating, because the ultimate conflict isn't just Horde versus Alliance. It's not light versus void. It's not orcs versus humans. At the deepest level, it's Azeroth versus everybody who keeps showing up. Maybe Azeroth isn't the place where all these races happen to live. Maybe Azeroth is the thing that has been fighting for its own survival this entire time. The Titans came to shape it, the old gods came to corrupt it, the Burning Legion came to destroy it, the orcs came to conquer it, the Scourge came to infest it, the Void came to consume it, and through all that, the native peoples of Azeroth kept surviving. The trolls survived. The elves survived. The tauren survived. The Pandaren survived. The Vulpera survived. The Sethrak survived. And deep beneath the roots of the world, the Haranir survived. Watching, waiting, remembering. So the next time you log into World of Warcraft and somebody says, "Welcome to Azeroth," you might want to ask them, which Azeroth? Because if you're a human, your ancestors were made by aliens. If you're a dwarf, your ancestors were made by aliens. If you're a gnome, your ancestors were made by aliens. If you're an orc, you're literally from another planet. If you're Draenei, you're an alien who lived on another alien planet before coming here. If you're Worgen, you're an alien-derived werewolf. If you're Dracthyr, you're a dragon's science experiment. And if you're a troll or an elf, congratulations! You might actually be one of the locals. Finally. Someone who actually belongs here. Although, considering what happens to everything that belongs to Azeroth, maybe being an alien is the safer option. Because, let's be honest, in World of Warcraft, being from Azeroth is basically a survival debuff. And with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.